Soft wind through tall grass. Distant crow calls. Footsteps on gravel. Narrator low, measured. There's something about the countryside. The open fields. The winding dirt roads. The way night feels. Darker out here. No streetlights. No neighbors close enough to hear you scream. Only the sound of the wind in the trees, and whatever else is hiding among them. Tonight, I have 3 true stories from the countryside. Stories of people who thought they knew what was out there, until they found out the hard way. So, lock the doors. Background. Low crickets, soft rustle of leaves. It was late summer of 2014 when Julia moved to her grandparents' old farmhouse in rural Illinois. The place had been empty for years, just sitting at the end of a long dirt lane, surrounded by overgrown fields and a tree line that turned black once the sun went down. Julia didn't mind. She wanted the quiet. After years of living in a cramped city apartment, the countryside felt like freedom. That was until the first night she saw him. It started small, just a shape in the dark. She was locking up for the night, pulling the heavy curtains closed in the living room, when she glanced toward the back field. A man, standing perfectly still, right by the old barbed wire fence. Too far to make out his face. Not moving, not waving, just watching. Julia froze, her heart pounding. She told herself it was probably a neighbor, maybe even someone lost. But the nearest house was almost a mile away. She stepped back from the window, flicked off the lights, and stood in the dark, peeking through a tiny gap in the curtain. The man didn't move. Finally, she turned away, trying to shake the image. By the time she looked again, he was gone. The next day, Julia tried to dismiss it. Maybe she'd imagined it. She had been tired from the move, and the mind can play tricks. But that night, around 11 p.m., she heard it. The sound of gravel crunching outside. Slow, deliberate steps, not coming to the door, but circling the house. Julia crept to the back window, her heart racing. And there he was again, closer this time, standing at the edge of the yard, the moonlight catching on his pale face. He was smiling. Julia ducked down so fast she hit her head on the windowsill. She stayed crouched there for what felt like forever, until the sound of footsteps faded. She called the sheriff the next morning. The deputy drove out, listened to her story, and shrugged. Probably just some drifter passing through, he said. These back roads get all kinds. Lock your doors. Keep a light on, you'll be fine. But Julia wasn't fine, because over the next week, the man kept coming back, always just standing there, always watching, sometimes at the fence, sometimes halfway into the yard. And every time, that same unnerving smile. The final night Julia saw him, the air was thick with heat and humidity. She was in bed, trying to sleep, when she heard it. Not footsteps this time, but a soft tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. She opened her eyes. The sound was coming from her bedroom window. Julia turned her head, slowly, and there he was, his face pressed to the glass, that smile stretching wider than she thought possible. She screamed, bolting from bed, grabbing the phone as she ran to the bathroom and locked the door. By the time the sheriff arrived, the man was gone. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing but a single greasy handprint on the window. Julia moved out 2 days later. The farmhouse still sits empty, and if you drive by at night, sometimes people say you can see a man standing by the fence, smiling. Background, distant wind, faint animal sounds. In 2009, Aaron was working as a night truck driver, hauling supplies between small farming towns in Kansas. One night, just past midnight, his route took him down a narrow road that cut through miles of empty cornfields. The sky was moonless, the road lit only by his headlights. That's when he saw them, a row of tall, thin trees off to the right. Strange, because he'd driven this road 100 times, and there had never been trees there before. He slowed the truck, staring. The trees were lined up perfectly, just inside the fence. And then, one of them moved, not like a branch swaying in the wind, like a person stepping forward. Aaron's chest tightened. He kept driving, telling himself he was overtired, maybe seeing shadows. That's when he heard it. A scream, high-pitched, sharp, and human. It came from the direction of the trees. Then another, and another, overlapping now, dozens of voices screaming all at once. Aaron slammed his foot on the gas, his hands locked on the wheel. The sound grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was right inside the cab with him. And then, silence, just as sudden as it had started. When Aaron reached the next town, he pulled into a 24-hour diner, shaking so badly he could barely hold his coffee. The waitress, a woman in her 60s, asked if he was okay. When he told her what happened, her face went pale. She said years ago, before Aaron was born, there had been a bus accident on that stretch of road. A high school cheer squad, coming back from a game, had lost control and rolled into the ditch. The bus caught fire. Everyone inside had burned before help could arrive. And the place where it happened? Right where those trees stood. Aaron never drove that route at night again. But he still hears the screaming sometimes, in his dreams. In the mountains of West Virginia, there's a ridge that locals avoid after dark. They say strange lights flicker there, that you can hear voices on the wind, even when you're alone. In 2017, a photographer named Melissa decided to rent a cabin on that ridge for a weekend getaway. She wanted peace, space to work, and maybe some moody landscape shots. The cabin was rustic, no Wi-Fi, no cell service, just a fireplace and a porch that looked out over the valley. The first night was quiet. The second wasn't. Melissa was editing photos by the fire when she noticed a faint glow through the window. At first, she thought it was moonlight breaking through the clouds. But the light was moving. She stepped outside. Down in the trees, maybe 100 yards away, were several orbs of light, drifting slowly between the trunks. They weren't flashlights. They moved too smoothly, too deliberately. And they didn't flicker. Melissa raised her camera, zooming in. But before she could take a picture, the lights went out. That night, she dreamed of people standing around her bed, their faces blurred, their clothes old-fashioned. When she woke, the cabin was silent, but the front door was wide open. The third night, it got worse. Melissa was in bed, listening to the rain, when she heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy. Then a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. She stayed perfectly still. The knocking came again. Melissa forced herself to get up, grabbed her phone, and opened the front door, ready to yell at whoever was there. No one. But in the mud just outside were barefoot prints, leading away from the cabin, up toward the ridge. Melissa left before dawn, driving the twisting mountain road as fast as she dared. Later, she learned that decades ago, a small religious sect had lived on that ridge. They vanished one winter, leaving their cabins empty. No bodies were ever found. Some say they still wander there at night, looking for someone to join them. Narrator low, fading. The countryside feels safe in the daylight. Open, peaceful. But when the sun goes down, it's a different world. Maybe it's the isolation. Maybe it's the dark. Or maybe there are things out here that never left. The man by the fence, the screaming tree line, the cabin on the ridge, all waiting for someone to notice them. And if you ever find yourself alone in the country at night, don't look too closely into the fields, because something might be looking back. Fade to silence.